Welcome to the EasySoft September 2015 webinar for the upcoming closing disclosure changes. For most people. For some people, they've already arrived. You're currently in listen-only mode. If you have any questions during the presentation, you may want to type them into the questions box on your GoToWebinar sidebar, and I'll attempt to answer those questions during the Q&A portion at the end. Keep in mind that everything we discuss here is presented for educational purposes, and we cannot give legal advice. However, we will be following up the slideshow with a presentation of the CDF software itself, called EasyCDF. At that point, we'll provide answers to technical questions regarding the software to the best of our abilities. The Dodd-Frank Act created a new agency called the CFPB and mandated the combination RESPA-TILA disclosures with proposed rules published originally back in 2012. These rules consisted of over 1,000 pages and several sample forms. At the start of October, these rules finally came into effect, and right now we're seeing the first closings with these new rules. The major changes from the CFPB have now hit, and we've been using the new closing procedures since October 3rd, with more and more people picking them up as time goes by. This has moved us from the 3-page RESPA compliant HUD format to a 5-page closing disclosure format. The CFPB has used this time to make a simplified format that, while longer on paper, will hopefully be simpler for the consumer to understand. This document, called the closing disclosure, is now called for on almost all closings. So what's changed? The changes that have been mandated are that the early truth in lending and good faith estimate need to be consolidated into a single loan estimate form, and the final truth in lending statement and the current HUD are being pulled together into a single closing disclosure form, sometimes in conjunction with an ALTA settlement statement. You'll also need to prepare a seller's disclosure in most cases. With these changes come some new terms, acronyms, and organizations that we all need to be familiar with. I've already brought up a few of those, but let's take a moment to go through them one by one. You're familiar with RESPA, or the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act of '74, and we've even touched on the Truth in Lending Act's forms earlier in this presentation. The CFPB, or Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, was created as a result of the Dodd-Frank Act to handle integrating the TILA and RESPA forms under a new overarching rule. On October 3rd, the Know Before You Owe mortgage rule was implemented, replacing the existing forms with the two new forms: the loan estimate, provided 3 business days after application for a loan is submitted, and the closing disclosure, provided 3 days prior to closing. This new rule is called TILA-RESPA, Integrated Disclosure Rule, or TRID. MISMO is the Mortgage Industry Standards Maintenance Organization. Big long name, basically they're a software thing. Their standards are growing in popularity and will ensure consistency throughout a closing at a whole new level. Right now, though, there will be some growing pains with this change. And finally, ALTA, the American Land Title Association. They're a latecomer to the field. Since October 3rd, though, several title companies have started asking for attorneys to prepare the forms in addition to the TRID compliant disclosure. Excuse me. MISMO creates, promotes, and maintains voluntary e-commerce procedures and standards for the real estate industry. These standards allow mortgage lenders, investors, borrowers, and others to exchange real estate, finance-related information, and e-mortgages efficiently and economically, with greater confidence in the security of the data, even if they are using different systems than they even if they are using more systems than they ever could have before. Increased transparency, ensured consistency, and universal standards all come as a result of the MISMO Compliance. MISMO standards have become popular throughout the real estate industry as a result, and have been accepted by major lending institutions and government agencies, including the CFPB, for their own electronic data exchanges. At this point, it looks like MISMO forms will continue to grow in popularity as we go into the new year. So what exactly does your software need to be MISMO compliant? EasySoft's disclosure software has a MISMO compliant import and export function, but some of you might be using a different software. So here's how you know. They must be able to generate and accept data files in accordance with MISMO 3.3 standards, but they also have to go through a MISMO certification program. And MISMO certification means a vendor has been vetted by the organization and found to be in compliance with their current standards. Therefore, the software is capable of producing and consuming MISMO-based files and transmitting them securely. Compliant products will bear the MISMO compliant or certified MISMO compliant certification mark. Be sure that your software certification is current. We've been talking a lot about the organizations involved and some of the standards that have been set, but let's take a step back and get a closer look at the new forms. The loan estimate will be created by the mortgage broker or lender, who is responsible for the accuracy of the document. MISMO compliance will be important in making sure that the estimate is properly accounted for on the closing disclosure. The first of those disclosures, the buyer's disclosure, will be the responsibility of either the settlement agent or the lender, and is the lender's job to maintain accuracy. This is generally called the closing disclosure, whereas the next one is called the seller's disclosure. That will be the settlement agent's job to produce. Once again, responsibility falls to the lender to ensure that there are no discrepancies. And finally, the ALTA statement, as I mentioned before, is a popular addition from title companies who want to have their fees itemized on the forms with more detail and in a slightly different way, separate from the closing disclosure. That can sound intimidating, but if you consider that there are now an additional 3 days from the initial CD to the closing, and that this means there are fewer forms to go through in all, and to guide the borrower through, this change might actually be turned in your favor. Of course, some other changes have come along that aren't specific to these forms, including changes to the timing requirements, record retention, the definition of application, variances, itemization of charges, and the disclosure of broker compensation and discount points. One thing I've been hearing is that some people aren't sure if they're going to be affected by the change or if they already have been and aren't aware of it. Unfortunately, this is going to affect everybody. Lenders, attorneys, brokers, settlement agents, and title companies will all be experiencing some changes at some level, but that doesn't mean this has to be a scary transition. As long as you have the right software in your corner, these new disclosures can be easy to acclimate to. The important thing to know for your part of the job is when you'll be processing the HUD-1 that everybody's so familiar with, and when you're going to be working with the new CD, because the old HUD won't be discontinued, at least not for the immediate future. The CD forms are the new primaries, often augmented with the ALTA statement at the request of the bank. But in cases with home equity resolving lines of credit, reverse mortgages, mobile homes, or other dwellings not attached to land, and no interest second mortgages, you'll still be using the old HUD-1 form. So let's talk about EasyCDF. This software from EasySoft has been designed with 100% TRID compliance as a top priority, with built-in safeguards to help ensure data accuracy. The real estate closing process, automated with EasyCDF, improves your productivity, reducing your closing time by as much as 80%. And the new real estate suite comes with EasyHUD, EasyCDF, and several other programs as well to handle these specific situations that still call for the HUD or might require amortization. EasyCDF is a complete real estate closing software solution made for small firms and solo practitioners and built to help you get through the closing with 100% compliance and without hiring additional staff. It really is as easy as filling in the blanks. EasyCDF gives you a streamlined real estate closing process step by step. First, you generate your RESPA-compliant HUD or TILA-compliant CDF with the options to print the full closing disclosure, just the seller's disclosure, or both. Then generate one of the 4 ALTA forms quickly with our automated products in the advanced printing module, or from scratch in our real estate docs section. Then move on to the case data, storing a comprehensive catalog of information on the case that can be used to look up information later on the buyers, sellers, lenders, etc., or automatically entered into a host of real estate documents that can be generated and filled out quickly and efficiently. The automation ensures that these documents are generated error-free and can be applied to your own library of forms. So your closing is being finalized and the documents have been sent out. The next step is to balance the ledger and send out checks. EasySoft supports this through both the EasyCDF and HUD programs, and the ledger function will help make sure that everything comes out correctly. Finally, move on to the 1099 filing page that lets you file as you go, and then you don't have to worry about rushing it all in at the end of the fiscal year. Before I move on to showing you the EasyCDF program itself, I'm going to show you a few of the free resources that can be a big help in making adjusting to the recent changes a little bit less painful. First, here are 4 great websites that you can look to for answers to any of your questions about the new rules. We've posted these links to our website as well, which is www.easysoft-usa.com. That first one, www.consumerfinance.gov, is a very good place to go to as a starting point because that is the CFPB's official website. However, keep in mind that in the last few days, I have noticed them having a few outages as they are making adjustments to their pages. So you may need to revisit once or twice before it'll give you all the information that you need. When you can get in there, though, it has everything. Every single question you could possibly ask has been addressed somewhere on that massive website. If you decide to visit our website, again, easysoft-usa.com, you can check out recordings of our previous webinars that go into detail on several of these subjects and training videos that we've produced for the software. You may also check out our blog for regularly released articles with all the latest information. There's also a support portal to help answer your questions that you might have about the different softwares and to make your practice run more smoothly. But several people who are attending this are not EasySoft customers at this time. What do you do if you don't have EasyCDF? Well, first you need to be sure that your current software, whoever that is, has updated from the HUD 1 to the new closing disclosure, but still supports both ALTA and HUD 1 statements. Don't forget, MISMO compliance may not be guaranteed. If you're going to be using that, be sure to confirm that you'll have you'll have this key compliance as more and more companies begin to use this tool. All of our active HUD users are automatically upgrading to EasyCDF now. So if you have our HUD, you'll also have EasyCDF on an active license. With the right software, you'll be equipped for handling your new closing disclosures. Our product consultants will be in contact with every attendee shortly, but if you wish to place an order or ask any questions, you can call 800-905-7638. I'll go ahead and stay here for just a moment in case anybody needs to copy down that phone number, and then we're going to move on to a demonstration of the software itself and a quick explanation as to where the different key features are. this is EasyCDF. If you haven't seen it before, it's laid out very much like the closing disclosure itself is. It has 5 pages laid out in the same format. The first page is mainly contact information and loan terms. The second page is itemization. The third page is almost identical to the page 1 of HUD 1. And pages 4 and 5 are more loan information and a lot of checkboxes and text. So let's go into it. Whenever you start to fill this out, you'll start off by filling in contact information here using these little people buttons. You go in and add a person. You can either type in new people or add them from an existing Rolodex of contacts. I've got one contact in there. I will use him. And the contact appears here. Your own information under settlement agent will appear, and you can fill out all the other information the same way it would be filled out more or less on the form, but with a little bit more ease of use built in as best we could. At the bottom of the page, closing costs and cash to close are calculated. If you're filling out the loan information yourself and working out projected payments, you may need to add or delete additional columns to account for different payment schedules or different payment plans over time. Page 2, like I said, mostly itemization. Very straightforward. Just fill in the chart, type in, or you can use drop downs. Notice that as I used my drop down and moved on, it rearranged the lines. This way we make sure that everything is alphabetized, so if you have to go back later, it's easy to find what was entered and make any adjustments that you have to make. The columns themselves are very straightforward, before and at closing for borrower and seller, and anything that's been paid by another person. We try and make these drop-downs specific to each section as best we could, based on examples from the CFPB, to help you when you're starting out, if you're not sure where something goes, and just to make time a little easier, make the time take a little bit less, because it's a lot quicker just to click homeowners association certification fee than type it out. Going down the page. In the middle of the page is our tax tables. It works the same as it did on our HUD program. You choose a jurisdiction. Let's say, well, first let me go back and I will add purchase price. I'm going to go ahead and purchase something for $200,000. And then when we come over to page 2, I'm going to set, I'm in New Jersey right now, so I will set my New Jersey standard. The tax table comes up and I accept it. And it has calculated my taxes for me, my transfer taxes. And then more itemization. The last section is essentially a miscellaneous area. And then I can put in my lender credit here, and again, total closing costs being calculated down here in sections I and J. So moving on to page 3. Page 3 has 2 sections under a normal purchase. The refinance does look a little bit different than this, and that's selected on the first page. Under cash to close, you put in the loan estimate that's provided to you, or if you have MISMO, you can import it. That's imported up here. Just click MISMO and choose import and select the MISMO file. If you've imported it, it will normally fill in the loan estimate, and then your own numbers will have populated the final column. You can see that my 200,000 is in there. Ideally, these are supposed to match. If one of the lines doesn't match, you come over here and you can add an explanation as to why. There's something similar to this on page 1. These are new mandates that bullet point explanations need to be added when there are discrepancies. And like I said, the other part looks very similar to page 1 of the old HUD, so most people should be pretty comfortable with it. So let's move on to page 4. Pages 4 and 5, like I said, is just a lot of reading and a lot of check boxes. Check off the boxes that apply and move on. There are a few boxes that you might need to fill in, such as these loan calculations, but again, if you're using MISMO, a lot of this information will already be provided by the lender, and you won't have to worry about it. That'll save a lot of time in the long run. It's just a matter of waiting until people have that stuff available. And then finally, the contact information. Contact information is added here for the lender, mortgage broker, real estate brokers for buyer, and real estate broker for seller. And you'll see I have drop downs here, but if you're using our current version of the software, the drop downs have been removed just to make it take a little bit less time, because you're never going to not need those 3 columns. So we decided just to remove the drop downs and make them locked in. Same as before, you just use the contact information person, fill in their info, and then move on from there. Now, some people who have gone through the forms have probably noticed that there's no place for the seller to sign on the final version. So we've included a checkbox at the bottom of the page to print the seller's signature addendum. If you check that, you get an addendum page that all it has on it is for the seller's signature, and that'll print out whether you choose to print the buyer version, which shows both buyers and sellers information. Like I said, that's the 5-page CD, or the seller's disclosure, which is 2 pages long. The addendum will attach and make that a 3rd page. I've had a couple questions about this. I work in technical support normally, so I want to address this right now because a lot of people do miss it when they first start using the software. The tools has our tax proration calculator. That makes life a little bit easier there too, because you don't have to figure out your tax proration. You just go into the calculator and fill it out. And that populates to page 3. And I think that's the key features of the form itself. When you move on, like I said, we have a ledger system, a 1099 system, and real estate docs that populate from a complex set of case data. Now the case data will fill in a lot from the closing disclosure, but there's more spaces that you can type in more information, and you can always add custom notes. So hopefully that will get you started with some information. I'd like to go ahead and open up the floor for questions.